Hi gang, Rob here. It is the morning of 12 June 2013, and today we have for you a knife review, and not just any knife review. This is kind of a daunting knife review for me. Well, not because we don't know about this blade, but probably for one reason is that because we do know this blade so well in the knife community. It is the second generation Cold Steel Recon 1 tactical folder. The other reason I think this is a bit of a daunting review is because this blade deserves a well done review. You know, we might think of this as a budget priced, foreign built, sort of generic lockback, clip, Bowie bladed folding knife from Cold Steel. One of many, many knives from Cold Steel. They just seem to churn them out like puppies, like baby rabbits, don't they? This one, though, I think is kind of special. Uh, for all their faults, and for all their hundreds and hundreds of models, Cold Steel does get it right. You know, if you sort of wade through all the ridiculous knives they make and all the not so well thought out knives and the minis, micros, and XLs that they produce to capitalize on names that are doing well, somewhere in the middle of all that, you find these wonderful works of mass-produced knife art, and I consider the Recon 1 to be one of them. Not only knife art, but a superbly designed and executed folding knife. Let's talk about what it is here for just a minute or two. We have, starting with the blade, a 4-inch hollow ground Bowie-shaped blade with a cutting edge that is, if you look closely, all belly, made of AUS 8A Japanese stainless steel, which I guess a lot of guys don't give AUS 8A much cred in the knife world. I'm not sure why. As Cold Steel executes this steel, first, they start with the annealed version of AUS 8, which gives it a fine and extremely consistent grain structure. It gives it it starts its heat treating process with no stresses from the manufacturing and processing parts of its life, and it heat treats into a very, very good knife steel. And then after heat treatment, it gets what Cold Steel calls a sub-zero quench, which is essentially a deep freeze, bringing all the martensite out in the steel structure, making it as hard and tough as it can be. And what you're left with after all that is a blade of plenty adequate hardness and wear resistance for edge retention that sharpens easily enough even in the field with rudimentary tools to a serviceable edge. A knife that's pretty chip resistant, pretty rust resistant, especially in this stone washed finish, which we'll get to in a little bit. Takes a super keen edge if you have the time to do that. Clearly, I had the time. Not a lot to criticize in this knife blade. The steel is plenty adequate to its purpose, and we'll get to that in a minute. The blade shape is the Bowie, of course, which I believe to be the most versatile blade shape in a knife. Why? Well, especially the hollow ground Bowie. what do you have? You have a knife that is super thin at the cutting edge, so it makes it a great slicer, great shaver, great whittler. You have a knife with enough breadth and mass in the spine to make it an adequate slasher, even chopper. And then this run of full thickness stock gives the knife great torsional rigidity. It's not going to bend a lot. It's going to be resistant to snapping. The belly in the blade makes it a great food prep knife. And then the clip point gives you a nice fine tip, good for fine tasks like digging splinters and whatnot, but still adequately strong. The swedge makes the tip cosmetically beautiful. Reduces a little weight and gives it a slimmer profile. There's just not much the Bowie-shaped blade isn't good at. Even in a defensive situation, which might be the number one intended purpose for this knife, not only does it penetrate well, not only does it slash well, it'll also slash on a back cut with this upswept pointy tip. Just a super, super all-purpose blade. There's nothing it doesn't do well, and some things it just does better than anything else. So, what do we have in addition to that 4-inch blade that is 3.5 millimeters thick, or about 137 thousandths? We have a handle constructed of super thick slabs of G10, almost 3/16 of an inch thick on each side. No steel in that handle except the lock mechanism. Do you need it? Absolutely not. I'm going to crush this with my fingers as hard as I can, and you see how much you can see it move. Okay, that's all I got, guys. Pretty strong. We do have a backspacer made of T6061 aluminum. And a lot of screws holding that together. You have 2 body screws back here, and then 6 pocket clip screws, or 3 pocket clip screws, and then 3 what are not dummy screws at the back, who actually hold the offside G10 slab into the back of the backspacer. This all G10 handle is 5 3/8 inches long, giving the knife an overall length of 9 3/8 inches. How about the weight? We've got a 4-inch, heavy stocked, very broad Bowie shaped blade. Over 9 inches long. Cold Steel lists this knife at 5.3 ounces. Now guys, knives of similar size in the knife world, similar size and thickness with this class of a blade, are generally going to weigh in between 6 and 8 ounces. 5.3 for this super strong, fairly large folding knife. My knife I weighed before we did this review, and mine comes in at 5.1 ounces. I don't know if that's just variability in the process, or whether it has to do with material I've removed from the handle for pocket clip mounting, my sharpening notch, or even the missing Teflon coating, but mine's 0.2 of an ounce lighter than advertised. 5.1 ounces. Well, let's talk about deployment, method, and locking mechanism. It is a thumb stud deployed knife, and if you notice, the thumb stud is asymmetrical, meaning different lengths on either side. For those of you in Yorba Linda, thanks for letting me borrow that one, Rush. Now, I've seen some guys who've reviewed this knife that have indicated in their reviews that this thumb stud is threaded on the outside and can be adjusted left and right by those threads. Those are not threads. They are they're just the pattern machined into the thumb stud. The threads are normal. You do use the slotted fitting to remove the thumb stud, either to remove it or to switch it from side to side. And you can see I had one slip of the screwdriver on mine. So I have my knife set up for left-hand carry, so the long side of the thumb stud's operated by my left thumb. The locking mechanism is a legend in its young age. It is Andrew Demko's triad lock, which is a great improvement on the lock back mechanism. See if I can show you half open. You have the normal tooth that locks into the blade tang at the end of the lock bar, but it not only locks into the blade tang, it gets trapped between the notch in the blade tang and the stop pin. So when the knife is open and locked, when you have negative forces on this blade in this direction, the hook in the back of the blade tang is pulling this lock bar forward into this stop pin. It is not trying to rip the hook of the blade tang through that tooth, with all the stresses being borne by the lock bar and the blade tang. That stop pin is collecting all those forces and distributing it through this ample G10 handle. What you have is a super strong lock back knife. Not only is the lock interface itself much stronger than a standard lock back, the tooth on this lock bar is so long. Look how far you have to push it to disengage the knife. That thing sticks up over a 1/4 inch from where it buries when the knife is open. And then let's look at see how far you have to depress that thumb portion of the lock bar to get that knife to disengage. You're not going to accidentally release the triad lock, at least not on this model. I've tried every grip possible to affect. Here's a reverse grip with my middle finger in that lock release mechanism. I'm squeezing as hard as I can, and I have blade play, but the knife won't release. It's not even halfway disengaged. It's a superb design. It's not buttery smooth or super easy to manipulate, but if we're talking about a knife that has a strong lock and a lock that will not be released inadvertently, the triad lock is as good as it gets. Now, what about lockup itself? Now, normally when we talk about lockup in a folding knife, we're talking about blade play, vertically and horizontally. Well, I would say that triad locks by nature do not have blade play. The way the lock components are designed, as the knife wears and as forces are applied to the blade, the tooth of this lock bar is sunk deeper into the notch in the blade tang. So when it's fully engaged, blade play is impossible. Now I'm going to show you something on my knife. First I'm going to open this slowly in full range with my thumb in contact with the stud. Okay, no side to side, no up and down. Now I'm going to show you, I think, just a little glitch or an idiosyncrasy of the triad lock. that's kind of interesting on most of the triad lock cold steels I've handled. Okay, I'm going to whip this thing open real hard. Now listen. Well, you can't hear it. Frankly, it didn't happen very much on that deployment. There you go. What I've found is if you open this knife really fast in a flip, because your thumb's not in contact with the blade, sort of forcing it gently against the stop pin, and because it happens so fast, the friction between the locking components as the blade tang bounces off the stop pin cause the lock bar sometimes not to fully engage. We're talking in a very minor way. Okay, there it is. Now, you heard that, right? A little bit of a tiny microscopic bit of up and down play. But then I grip the knife, put my thumb on the lock bar, and it sinks that tooth all the way in. I mean, we're talking 5 or 10 thousandths of an inch is all it's lacking. And then you're home. But even before you're home, you're in no danger of lock failure or the knife folding prematurely. And this is after my internal fluff and buff, reducing friction as much as I possibly could. It's just a characteristic of the production triad locks. Not anything I fault the knife for. My Lawman does not have it. My Recon 1 does a little bit. Not a big deal. Okay, let's talk about this handle a little bit. As I said, 100% G10. And the handle kind of tells you more than anything about the intended use of this knife. This is a full-blown, purpose-built, folding tactical blade. This is meant to be used by someone who might have to survive with it, defend his life with it, fight with it. And let's see how that handle works. Okay, for a saber grip designed for a thrusting motion, my hand is completely locked in some very comfortable finger grooves with a large choil or finger guard. I have some jimping, I guess you could call it, in the G10 handle for my thumb. It doesn't really do much, and frankly, it's not that necessary. When my grip is locked in, I can't go forward on that blade. Let's say I'm using it in a reverse grip. Sorry about the poison ivy, guys. I probably should have worn gloves for this. The knife in the reverse grip is superbly comfortable. I mean superbly comfortable. For any kind of a slashing move or a back rip with that clip point. How about the hammer grip for doing some heavy use cutting? Super comfortable again. I will say this, the very bottom of the finger guard does tend to dig into the index finger just a little bit. Under extended use, that might get a little uncomfortable, and it kind of, the contour of the rest of the handle does force your hand against that. What if you back up on it and do some chopping? The pinky rests against the very tail of the handle, so it's hard to do in the keep this in view, but with a loose grip and a little pressure on that pinky for snap cuts, it's wonderful. There just aren't too many grips that I can find that the handle does not accommodate. It's super strong, it's low maintenance. The texture of the G10, this is well documented, is super grippy. So grippy, in fact, that for pocket carry, some modification needs to be done. And let's talk for a minute about the mods I've done to this knife. I will put a link on this video to my modification video for the American Lawman, because the mods are the same. The construction and nature of the knives are exactly the same, just different styles and sizes. But I've removed the Teflon coating from the blade and from the lock bar and from the pocket clip. The clip and the blade both have this gorgeous stonewash on them from Cold Steel, which should aid in the corrosion resistance of this AUS 8A steel. It looks far better than the Teflon coating, both in the appearance of the blade itself and the logos, in my opinion. These logos, especially the front side, when you have the black coating, this Recon 1 shows up in stark, shiny metal, and it's kind of offensive. It's kind of a cartoonish logo. The Cold Steel Taiwan on the other side as well. So the removal of the coating kind of mutes them. You're still left with a very slippery knife. The stonewash over the factory satin finish just makes it like this gorgeous semi-gloss. Even when it's bare, it just feels a little oily, which I think is pretty good quality for a knife. The clip is also stonewashed. The lock bar is not, that I can tell, but it still matches up very well after you remove everything. And then, of course, I've removed the pocket clip and then sanded flat the portion of G10 under the clip so it extracts from the pocket and is inserted in the pocket without tearing up fabric too badly. It's still plenty strong to hold the knife in. And then while the knife is apart for stripping, I've also polished all the components of the locking areas of the knife. The nose of my tooth has been polished, the back side of my tooth, and the bottom of the tooth that rides along the circumference of that blade tang. So my knife is very smooth. There's no side-to-side play, and watch as I release the lock. It is a drop-free knife, actually, which makes it, even with a super stiff spring, it makes it pretty darn easy to get open. The only thing, in my opinion, that keeps this from being a great, maybe best ever folding tactical knife on a budget is that you have to be kind of good with it to get it open quick. And it has to be adjusted right. It takes a lot of effort to open that knife. So your muscle memory has to be spot on if you want to get it out and open quickly. And the last modification I did, I showed you in a video 2 days ago. The sharpening choil, or the expansion of the lame little sharpening choil that comes on the knife. Look at that large plunge grind radius. As these knives come from the factory, at least mine, now they seem to be a little different. They have a big sweeping plunge grind, and then you're left back here with this tiny little notch and a big wad of unsharpened metal, which makes sharpening the knife a real pain. And it doesn't look good either. So I applied this sharpening notch to give me perfectly sharp edge all the way to the end of it. It looks kind of cool too, I think. So, what do we have here? For a price point in the $65 to $70 range, we have a 5-ounce-ish folding tactical blade that is absolutely rock solid, built like a tank, doesn't weigh a lot, super cutting ability, low maintenance, with a pivot, by the way, of a combination of phosphor bronze and paper-thin Teflon washers for strength and good natural lubricity. You know, if this knife's running totally dry, it's still got that Teflon to lubricate the pivot. You know, I was thinking on the way home last night, preparing for this review, if I were going to go into a bad situation that was going to last a few days and I was going to be outdoors away from home, and I had to choose one folding knife, didn't know how long I was going to be out there, maybe it was going to be bad weather, wet, cold, I might have to use this knife for fire making, food preparation, and defense. I might have to sharpen it while I'm out there. What knife would I take? You know, let's assume I'm going to live through it. and return to a normal life, I'm not going to take my most expensive tactical blade. I'm going to take something that's going to hold up, that I won't care if it gets damaged, that's going to be super effective for the task at hand. I probably picked this knife. My life doesn't need to be expendable in that situation, but when it all blows over, if I've ruined my $65 Cold Steel, I'm not heartbroken. I'll go get another one, and it probably helped save my life. I don't know that you can do better for this particular application, the large folding tactical knife, for the price point we have. So we can put away our resentment for Lynn Thompson for a minute. We can stop snickering at the cartoon knives that come out of Cold Steel and stop laughing at their commercials for a minute and just sit up and recognize that the Cold Steel Recon 1 is a very awesome tactical blade for the money you have to pay for it. I absolutely love mine. It's kind of one of those things you have to man up to use. It's kind of like a 12 gauge. You pull this baby out of your pocket and you're going to flick it open. You better get a grip. You better get your thumb buried in that stud. And you better open with authority. And at the end of the day, if you play with it too much, your thumb's going to hurt. But that's okay. Good job, Cold Steel. I will say this too, they have paid attention to this plunge grind issue, because I've noticed in pictures of some of the current production knives that plunge grind is almost straight, like a Spyderco plunge grind, no radius at all. And they have no sharpening notch and apparently don't need it. If you have one of these that's a couple months old, feel free to chime in the comments and tell me if that change works better than this old design. That's all I have for today, guys. My advice to you, if you don't have a Recon 1, go get one. Whether you like clip point, spear point, tanto blade, serrations, or plain edges, even in, I think now, 4 different sizes. I prefer the original, by the way. The Recon 1 probably has a style you're going to like. And for $65, $70, you just can't buy much more folding knife than this. So grace and peace, and remember, guys, the word is sharp. Have a great day.